When I quit teaching, I handed my principal a resignation letter in the middle of the day on a Friday. It was like 11 o'clock a.m. And I walked out and I felt fantastic. It was in the middle of the year. I was leaving my students, but I knew that the pain that I was feeling from the previous 6 months of being in school was finally going to be released. So a day later, I felt a million times better. A couple weeks later, I felt even better. And now it's over a year, and I cannot believe I waited so long to actually walk out of that job. It was such a brutal situation. And I know that many of you out there, many of you teachers, know how I'm feeling and know what it's like to be in those situations. So I recently made a video about it, and it got quite a bit of views. And with that comes some negative comments. And I had a lot of people on there complaining. I had people making racist comments, calling teachers whiners and quitters, and you have no idea how good you have it because you get summers off. I said that there were some people that said the teachers were overpaid. It ran the gamut. Mostly positive. I think anybody who's a teacher or knows teachers really well resonated with that video, but I wanted to make a follow-up because I don't think that I fully explained some of the things that teachers are going through. One of the reasons I'm doing this kind of stuff is because teachers are voiceless. They are living in a culture of fear, and that culture of fear stops them from speaking out. So even though they're trying to do something noble, they're trying to teach the youth of America, they feel that when they see bad things going on at the school, they can't speak out. They are intimidated. Administrators often intimidate teachers. I had in my school, in my situation, I know that there is an all-star teacher that was written up multiple times for speaking out at staff meetings. There was a teacher that was written up for liking a tweet, just liking a tweet that wasn't even inappropriate. The tweet was critical of the school. That teacher liked the tweet just to kind of say, hey, this is not, this is actually happening. And then that teacher was brought into the office and got in trouble. At staff meetings, the principal would tell us, hey, we are all family. But the reason that the principal was saying that is because he also followed it up with what goes on in the school stays within the family. Let's try to keep it inside. Let's not try to let the world know what's going on in here. That's a problem that exists throughout the country in education in general. So what I did is I came up with 4 reasons based on my experiences and talking to dozens and dozens of teachers over the last couple months, teachers who are in the profession, teachers who are leaving the profession, teachers who are just fed up and tired and don't know what to do. I've been talking to a lot of them, and I've come up with 4 main reasons why teachers are leaving in this moment in time. Before I get into those reasons, I wanted to talk real quickly about the pandemic. A lot of people have said that the pandemic has made things worse, and that once the pandemic is more in the past, then things are going to get better in general, and educators won't be as stressed and all that stuff. But I would have to say that I think that the pandemic has just revealed many people's true colors. And I think that's happened in education. I think that's what we're seeing in education is that these systems that are existing, that kind of existed before the pandemic, are crumbling sometimes during that kind of a stress level. And the administrators, the leaders are revealing their true colors. So why do teachers quit? All right, here are the 4 reasons that I came up with. Number 1 is incompetent leadership. Number 2 is an absolutely broken and shattered system. Number 3 is the mental health of students and educators. And number 4 is many educators are leaving because of the activities of the students. So to briefly understand what teachers go through and why teachers are quitting, we also have to step back just a little bit before I get to fully explaining the reasons. Most teachers entered the profession in order to change the world. I remember being a college student, being so excited to be able to go and become a teacher in order to change the system, in order to be that teacher that was an example for me. I had a high school experience that was pretty much average. I hated it, and I was bored to death half the time. I had friends, and that was the main reason I went to school, is to hang out with my friends. But I was bored to death. I remember history class, every single day was the same. So it was like notes, study for the test on Thursday, and then a test on Friday. And we did the same thing the entire semester. And during the test taking, the teacher just sat with the newspaper, and everybody had to be quiet so he could finish his newspaper. That was like a pretty good microcosm of my high school experience. It was boring, except for one teacher, Mrs. Ward, who made it fun and interesting and connected with the students and asked them to bring their own personalities to the table, to bring those into the classroom. And she was also a little bit of a rebel. So she would say, the school wants us to do this, but we're not going to do it. We're going to do the right thing. And I that's what motivated me to become a teacher. Her making me feel and making other people around her feel like they were loved, that they were welcomed, and that they had value. And I don't think teaching and I don't think the education system does that enough to the students. So I wanted to go and become a teacher to change that and be that force of change in the world. So I did it. I went to school. You know, you go through your student teaching and all that, and then you become a teacher. And then the first day is like, wow, this is hard. The second day is, this is hard, but you know, I can do it. After a couple weeks, you're tired. You didn't realize that all the grading that you have, all the assignments that you give out are going to take hours of grading. You realize that you don't have to do that. You don't have time to do it at school, so you do it all at home. Suddenly you realize after a month that you are struggling. A couple months in, you are struggling double. You are under a mountain of paperwork. You are trying to do all the state forms and the attendance and the IEPs, and you're trying to do all that stuff and manage it all and make lesson plans and do the grading, and you are struggling. A couple months down the line, 6 months into the year, you are in trouble. I was there. I remember feeling that, and I think most new teachers feel that. Somehow that has become kind of the norm. So even though we have like teacher mentors and stuff like that, most of the administrators don't pay a lot of attention to those new teachers and give them a lot of love. I remember multiple times new teachers coming to the school and them crying in the office before school, bawling. I remember going to school at one of my previous schools and walking into the parking lot, walking through the parking lot, and I saw this teacher who was just in her car sobbing. And I stopped. I said, "Hey, are you okay?" And she's like, "I don't know how I'm going to find the strength to go through today." Right? She felt lost. She felt alone. She talked to me later and said that nobody's been helping her. She didn't feel like she had any support from administration. And her story is not completely uncommon. Now, for those of you that have amazing administrations, that's awesome. That's incredible. But that's not totally the norm. You should tell your administrators to let everybody else know what they're doing, because that is not the norm in many people's experiences. You know, the problem is that veteran teachers kind of get used to this. This is just how teaching is. This is the way it is. This is the way it's always been. It's always been a momentous struggle. Teachers trying to come in and do good things, even with it seems like almost everything is stacked against them. It's extreme. And so we're at a point right now where a lot of things are coming to a head, and teachers are leaving the profession at an insane rate. So related to some of the stuff I just said, the first reason people are leaving is incompetent leadership and poor leadership, just leadership that is just not capable of doing things. And to talk about that, I'll tell you a story about my 4th or 5th year teaching. I can't remember exactly. I was at my school, a low-income school. I loved the students. I loved the situation. I really enjoyed being there. But this one thing happened that really made it maybe stop to think that maybe things weren't all right with the people above me, with the administration. Sometimes. I had some great leaders too. This situation was 3rd block of the day. We had 4 blocks, and the 3rd block was my plan block. So I was in there trying to do some grading and get ready for the next class. And this administrator comes in, and she's all frazzled. She looks like she's been through a lot. And she's like, "I need your help. I need you to cover this class." And I was like, "Okay, let's go." So she takes me down the hallway, and she's like, "All right, it's that class." And I kind of knew which class it was already because we're getting closer, and it's really, really loud. And I'm like, "Oh gosh, what is happening here?" And I go into the classroom, and it's really like one of those bad movies that shows an out-of-control classroom. I mean, somebody's laying on the ground, somebody's singing, there's stuff flying in the air, people are throwing stuff, right? It's one of those situations, and you're just like, holy cow. In a block, it's an hour and a half. So this is around 15 minutes into the block, and I still had an hour and 15 minutes or so. It was insane. And so she's like, "Thank you," and she walks away. And I'm stuck with this class. I don't know any of the kids. This is a history class, and it's a first-year history class. This teacher had been calling out a little bit, probably because of mental stress, and she didn't know how to handle it. And I'm in the class, and I'm looking around, and I'm kind of my 4th year, you know, I'm a little bit of a veteran, so I kind of know what to do. And I start slowly. I put my name on the board. I try to get a couple people to calm down and be quiet. Pretty soon it happens. People are paying attention a little bit. And I just introduce myself. "Hey, I'm Mr. Z. It's good to see you all. Let's just take the next 45 minutes to an hour, and let's just talk, and let's get to know each other's names and a little bit about each other. Let's just get into a circle, and let's just spend our time doing that. And that way, I know you guys next time I see you in the hallway." And, a couple of the people started doing it. We got in a circle, and pretty soon, even the kid that's like laying on the ground gets up and they're in their seat, and we all start sharing each other's names and giving us a little bit about each other. Now, some of the responses weren't totally 100% appropriate. It was a struggle. I'm not trying to say I'm like the greatest teacher ever, anything like that. But it worked. It worked. And throughout the rest of the year, some of those students would find me later and they'd be like, "Hey, Mr. Z, good to see you," right? It was a cool situation. I got through it. It was a struggle. I got through it. And then I had to run to class. I had to go book down to my class so I could get ready for the next, my actual class, because my plan period for that day was gone. It was around a week later or 2 weeks later when I was going to be observed. Now, observations are pretty much the only way teachers are evaluated. That's the only way that we get to have an administrator or a principal or some kind of expert come down and view what we're doing. On this day, we're doing a little bit about media literacy in my classroom. I was an elective. I teach electives, and I taught project-based learning and all kinds of cool stuff. And during this lesson, we were talking about media literacy and 9/11. It was years after 9/11. And some of the conspiracy theories about 9/11 were surfacing, and a lot of it was surfacing on social media. So we were talking about that situation in class, and it was really awesome. It was engaged. The students were talking. They were throwing out their own theories. They were debunking other theories. Had a really great conversation. It was the start of like a couple, 3-4 days of really great learning, good conversations. And I was observed by that administrator who had me come down to cover that other class. That's the same administrator. The entire observation, the evaluation that I got was like just baseline. It was like fine. And she was like, "Yeah, I noticed there was a student in the back that was sleeping, and you didn't wake them up and get them up." And yeah, that was true. That was happening. And what I tried to tell her, what she didn't know, was that student was taking care of his brother and sister. His mom and dad have been gone for weeks. The counselors knew about it, everything. He was the only person at home, the only person old enough to take care of his younger kids. He was up all night doing that. And so I was teaching an elective. Him and I had an understanding. He was a good kid. If you need your rest, if you need to take a nap, go ahead and do it in my class. And some teachers are like horrified by that kind of stuff and whatever. But that kid was a good kid. He did his homework. He was smart. He knew his stuff. He was just in a really, really difficult situation. And I thought he needed to be more awake in his core classes. And if he needed a nap in my class, I was going to go give it to him every once in a while. And I tried to tell the administrator that, and she's like, "It doesn't matter. You can never have a kid sleeping in your class." And some of you might agree with that. That's fine. But she had thrown out everything that I had, all the good stuff they had done. And the thing that I thought about afterwards that really made me think about how incompetent the administration was, and the cracks really started to break apart as far as me believing in the system, was when I realized she couldn't handle that other class. That class that needed coverage, she knew it was a problem, and she came and got anybody who had an open period to cover that class. And I went back and I talked to a couple of the kids. And the reason why I came into that class 15 minutes late, that crazy class that was that history one, was because she was in there trying to get them to pay attention, and she couldn't do it. She struggled, and they said that she left, and then that's when I came in. That's why it was around 15 minutes late. And I was like, this administrator who was evaluating me and saying that I was doing an average job, and that was telling me that I was not as good of a teacher as I could be because I let a kid sleep who needed the sleep. She was the one that was in charge of me, and she couldn't even handle one class that needed some coverage. And I remember the next couple weeks just thinking about that and being like, this is kind of messed up. It made me think of some other situations. I had another situation where I had, it was way early on in my career, I had kids fighting in my room. So I got security down, sent them to the office, right? The security came down, pulled them to the office. 15 minutes later, the administrator for those two kids brought them back to the class and said, "Hey, they're good now." They were fighting in the class. One kid punched the other kid. I told the administrator, I was like, "They can't come back to this." He's like, "They're fine, they're fine." And he looked frazzled too. He just wanted to get rid of them. And I was a young teacher, and I was like, okay, I guess. And it caused a problem in that class, and I felt a little bit lost because I didn't know what else to do. Who else do I go and talk to? And there was a whole bunch of other situations. I mean, if you're a teacher, you kind of know some of this stuff that's going on. It seems like the higher up you go in education, some of those administration positions, some of those leadership positions, they are teachers escaping the classroom sometimes. They can't handle the classroom. They don't want to. They get out and they get paid more the higher they go. Okay, that's not always the case. And I'm not trying to, I've had amazing administrators, but that is far too often the case, right? It seems like the more they get paid, the less impact, the less they have to do with the actual classroom, and the more insane some of their decisions are, right? So we as teachers have to deal with that insanity. I've been talking to teachers recently, and one of the teachers that I taught with at my former school, the one where I resigned from, is one of the best educators I've ever met. Beyond doubt, one of the most skilled educators I have ever encountered, who took extra effort, extra care for the kids that needed the most help. An amazing educator. And he is actually leaving the profession completely this year. He said, "I'm quitting because of hypocritical and abusive behavior from administrators and school board members who are supposed to be leaders. They have acted nothing like leaders during the pandemic. Most administrators and school board members showed the following toxic anti-leadership traits during the pandemic: toxic positivity, personal emotional insecurity, retaliatory behavior, bullying, unwillingness to listen, shame projection, or simple denial of the real problems. What was abundantly clear is that many administrators and school board members lack the empathy needed to lead other professional adults. I can't be part of a profession that puts professional expertise and voice on the bottom rung of the priority list." He really hit the nail on the head there. Leadership has some big issues. One of the things that we know is that we're going to have some serious problems with teacher shortages right now and in the future. In Omaha, Nebraska, the largest school district that we have, they're having 80% more teachers leaving this year than last year. 80% more. That's unsustainable. That's insane. One of the school board members for that district has this to say about it: "We are adults, yes. We have to overcome all these challenges and remember that it is about our students. And quite frankly, if you're an educator or anyone else in our district and that is not your underlying goal, it might be time for you to find a new profession, plain and simple." What do you think we're doing here? All right, we're not coming to school because every other week we get to wear jeans on a Friday, right? We're not coming to school because once a year on Teacher Appreciation Day, we get donuts in the morning. That's not why we're coming to school. We are here for the kids. That's why we want to be teachers and try to help those young people become better versions of themselves in order to make the world better. You know, that's why I wanted to relate. That's why we entered the profession. 99% of the teachers out there are good people who want to do good work. And somebody who's a school board member is basically telling the teachers to shut up or get out. That's absolutely insane. And that's something that is not uncommon around the country. Okay, so leadership, incompetent leadership, is the first reason why teachers are leaving. Number two is that the system itself is broken, okay? The system itself is in trouble, and it has been for a while. You know, it seems like the system exists to feed the system. It exists to keep the status quo the same. The administrators seem to sometimes exist to try to keep their jobs instead of rattling the cages and making education better. One of the unfortunate facts about teaching is that many teachers, especially the more they see, the more years they're there, they start to look the other way when they see bad things happening. They start to pick their battles, and they're like, man, I can't handle all the bad things, all the ways that the system are broken. I can't address it all. So I just wanted to share a few of those things, very small amount of some of the things that teachers see that are broken, and sometimes we just don't know what to do, right? We're not equipped. We're so busy doing grading, attendance, IEPs, a million other things, that it's hard to fight the bigger battles, okay? Supposedly that's what administrators and leadership is supposed to be doing. And so teachers struggle with this kind of stuff. So just as a couple examples, one of the main examples is that black students are punished at a higher rate than white students for the same thing that they did wrong. It's something that the data supports. This is not an opinion. You know, I don't want anybody to jump out there. We're not living in a post-racial society. This is happening. This is stuff that's built into the system. The black students are treated unfairly compared to the white students. That's just truth, okay? Look it up. I'm going to put some links below. Check it out. It is the absolute truth. And I can give you a couple examples. I saw examples from my school. So I remember quite a while ago, was within the same amount of time that really woke me up and made me think about this stuff, was I had a couple students that were A students who, white students, they got in trouble at prom for drinking. And barely anything happened. They were seniors, no big deal. Everybody kind of laughed it off, right? They were caught at prom with alcohol. Couple weeks after that, I think, within the same time period, I had a couple of my black students, these black girls, who all of a sudden weren't in class anymore. So I tried to find out what was going on. And I found out that they were both, one was suspended and one was expelled. So I started doing some investigating because these are two good kids. The girl that was expelled was pregnant. She was a great kid who was trying to graduate high school and get the best life for her kid. And she was somebody who I really cared about. When I found out what happened, I was just flabbergasted. So what had happened is with the pregnant girl was feeling some pain. She asked her friend for some Tylenol. An administrator saw this, and because it was prescription Tylenol, 800 milligram prescription Tylenol, she suspended the one kid and then expelled the pregnant girl. When I went and talked to the parents, they were crying. The kid was crying. It was an emotionally charged situation. I talked to the counselors, and they're like, "I'm trying to do something about it. I don't know what's going on." I talked to that administrator, and she said, "Hey, my hands are tied. It's in the policy book. We have to expel them." And the unfairness of that situation still sticks with me. Like it's like 15 years ago. It still is in my gut, and I'll never forget how damaging that situation was and how unfair that was. That these two kids who were good kids trying to do the best for themselves were treated like this. I could go on for a long time talking about this, but just one of the other ways that you could see how broken the system is the educational research about class sizes. It's just absolutely true that the smaller class sizes perform better. So if you're a student in a smaller class, you have a better chance of performing better. The teacher enjoys the class more. The kids get personal feedback, right? It's been proven for many, many years that this is the ideal way that you conduct class. You have smaller classes. And yet, our class sizes seem to continue to rise. We are told as teachers that we are supposed to individualize our lessons so every kid in the class has a chance to succeed. How can we do that when there's 30, 35 kids in the class? Seriously, I want you to think about that for a second. It's just not really possible. And yet we somehow pretend like it is. We pretend like that's an okay situation. When we're at the school meetings and the teachers are like, "I can't do this anymore," the administration, the leaders just kind of shrug. That's what we're dealing with, they say. And they always tell us that there's a plan. It's going to get better. We're going to do something about it. And it just doesn't happen. We are forced to be teachers in a system that does not use its own educational research to make things better. We tell our students, use research, focus on the research, find the truth, do what's right. And then the field of education itself is not doing that. How does that make any sense? We can even go a little bit more fundamental than some of that stuff, right? The educational research for the past many years has been based on kids perform better when doing real world projects that have meaning to their life. We are instead in a system where they are in rows in a classroom and they're taking notes over something that seems pointless. It seems meaningless. And when students ask the teachers, "When are we going to ever use this?" They're always like, "Oh, you'll use it someday," or "It's good for your brain," or something like that. But all that stuff is garbage. The students need to be doing real world projects that have meaning. And almost everything in education is completely different than that. It's one of those things that makes me think maybe that's the point of the system, because the students start off at the very youngest levels, standing in lines and covering their mouths. Are we teaching kids to be critical thinkers? Are we teaching kids to be the best selves that they can be? Or are we making it easy for the system to manage them? Think about that for a second. Are we creating future workers that are passive, that follow the rules beyond anything else because they've been punished and trained through school to do that? Is that what we're doing here? Because if we want really, really skilled young people to enter the workforce and change things and make things for the better, then we have to get away from that style of education. The kids sitting in rows, taking notes and taking a test just does not work. It's not good education whatsoever. And yet that's how most of our schools are operating. Why? How? How has that continued to go on? A lot of teachers know this, but I got to say, at the end of the day, for some teachers, it's just not possible. It's not something that they can even consider because they are so overwhelmed. They have state standards to try to teach. They have to do the same thing on the same day as the other teachers in the district. So if you have a lesson that's not going well, you don't have a chance to go back and fix it. You don't have a chance to make it meaningful to their life because that would take a lot more time. And you've got hours and hours and hours of grading ahead of you, right? It's much easier, unfortunately, to sit kids in a row and give them tests and say you're a good teacher. The system does not work. And a lot of teachers are within that system. A lot of them, these brave, awesome Michael Jordans of teaching, are trying to change that, right? I was not that strong. The more I see teachers who are that strong, the more I see them getting broken down as well. They get in trouble, they get punished, they are forced out of the teaching system. And those are the people that we actually need to stay teaching in order to change things, in order to make them better. We need those people as leaders. What are we doing here? The third reason is mental health. Okay, let's look at mental health for a moment. This is really important. In June of 2021, I'm reading off my notes. In June of 2021, there was a report that found that teachers were almost 3 times more likely to report symptoms of depression than other adults. And look, from my experience teaching, even before the pandemic, especially during the pandemic, this is absolutely true, and maybe it's probably a little bit low. Teachers are struggling in the classroom with mental health. They are told that they are professionals, but they're almost never treated professionally. It starts to wear teachers down, especially during the pandemic when we have so many other issues that we have to deal with in school and at home. Teaching is one of the most human professions out there, right? We care about the young people in our classrooms. We truly care. Remember why we became teachers? We wanted to change the world. And so each one of these students in our classes, each one of these are like jewels that we think can be great. Even a lot of the bad kids, right? Some of those kids turn out to be incredible kids later. And so we put on the good fight every single day, and we care about these kids. We get there before school. We stay late. We do clubs and activities. We're there on the weekends. We're there all the time. And yet we know that that's going to make us struggle at home because we're going to have to bring all that paperwork home when we're so busy at school. Teachers give, and give. And pretty soon, that giving has a cost. Throughout the years, these things start to add up, and it becomes toxic to our mental health. I think that teachers stop believing themselves. I think that teachers stop believing in their own self-worth sometimes. They put all of the worth that they have in the world into their students. They put all the effort that they have into their students, and they don't have a lot of left in the gas tank. I know many teachers who felt the same way. I would go home and be a shell of myself for my family. So I would give everything to my classroom, and I would go home and I wouldn't even know how to smile. I remember specific moments of me coming into the door and looking into my house, and my son came up and hugged me, and I remember feeling dead inside because I had nothing left. The gas was empty. I didn't know what to do, and I felt like a robot when I patted him on the back. I will never forget, and I'll never get back some of those times. It wasn't until I left teaching that some of that stuff was off my shoulders, that a lot of that stuff was on my shoulders, and I started to realize the damage that I was doing to myself and to my family by being so invested in my classroom. So you can see how mental health is such a big deal to teachers. We give everything, we don't get much back. Finally, one of the main reasons that people are leaving the educational world, that people are leaving teaching, is because of the students. They find that dealing with the students right now is more difficult than they've ever experienced. I've heard that by many teachers. Veteran teachers of 20, 30 years have been emailing me and telling me how much of an issue they're having with the students and how little support they're getting from administration. I saw some stuff the last 2-3 years of teaching that were shocking. And a lot of teachers have to deal with this every day in their classroom all the time. And they're not getting support from home. They're not getting support from administration. They are feeling lost because the kids are completely out of control at times. But I truly believe that these are the same kids that were in our classroom 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. We often look at the past, right? The previous generation say, oh, they weren't like that when I was a kid. And that's probably true. I think there's a couple reasons why. Number one is that students are in crisis mode. Their mental health is likely worse than teachers. According to a CDC report in 2021, almost 50% of students report feeling sad and depressed. More than half of the students reported emotional abuse at home. Those numbers get worse when you talk about students of color, non-straight students, and female students. 20% of female students, for instance, have seriously thought about suicide. That's unfathomable to think about, right? The kids are not all right. Of course, they're going to bring some of those problems into the classroom, right? And where are the resources? Where are the ability to help these families that are struggling so much? Where is the help going to come from? So much is put on the teachers to manage their classrooms. You go and you tell an administrator, we got some serious problems. They're like, I don't care. We got serious problems everywhere. Teachers are just alone. They're flapping around in the classroom trying to figure out what to do with some of these kids who have serious needs, serious mental health needs that are not being addressed by our system. Some of you out there say that that's not the responsibility of the schools. The schools should have kids sit down and learn reading, math, and science and all that stuff. And we should do that. We should teach the kids all of those different subject matters. But unfortunately, we are also responsible for those kids' well-being. We just are. That's how it's become right now. but we're not equipped to deal with that. Teachers are having to deal with students without the resources necessary to truly get the best out of them, to truly help them with their mental health problems. And number two, I think that the students today, I think they're a little bit more savvy and they're smarter than they ever have been. And they're seeing the cracks of the system. And I think some of their behavior stems from that. We come from a history of education where teachers are the center of knowledge, right? Back in the past, the teacher stood in front of the classroom. And the reason why everybody was sitting there taking notes is because that was the only way to get the education. The teachers had to do it. The teachers had to give out the book, et cetera, right? We are living now where the center of knowledge is actually in every student's pocket. They pull out their cell phone and there is more information there than we've ever had access to in the history of mankind. So when students are sitting here and they're listening to the teacher drone on and it's boring and it's worthless, I think the students are finally getting smart to the fact that the system doesn't really work for them too much. Students are bored. They feel like what they're doing in classroom is worthless and they don't find any meaning. They also see that schools are behaving kind of like prisons. You have to ask, like in high school, most of the time you have to ask to go to the bathroom. And again, I get it. Some situations are different. There was some kids where like, hey, if you go to the bathroom, you better go see the nurse and have her write a note, come back. But 99% of the time, one of the things I had to do when kids came into my class as a freshman, they would raise their hand and, hey, can I use the restroom? And the answer was like, never raise your hand and ask that again. If you need to go to the restroom, you're going to act like an adult. You're going to go use the restroom, come back. That's the way it is. But most schools function somewhat like prisons. I might be over-exaggerating a little bit, but I don't think I'm over-exaggerating that much. The internet has made more students aware of the hypocrisy of adults, right? It's not as easy to lie to them anymore. It's harder to say that this has value when it's obvious to the kid that there is zero value in what you're doing into the classroom, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months. We have to listen to the students a little bit more because they've been telling us this stuff for years. Maybe society needs to look into the mirror a little bit when we talk about the problems of education, when we talk about how bad the kids are acting. Maybe society needs to look in the mirror because some of the adults, quite a few too many of the adults, are acting absolutely out of control. How do we expect our kids to behave in the classroom? Think about it. Think about what they're seeing in the news.
We know who you are. We know who you are. You can leave freely, but we will find you, and we know who you are.
So what do we do? How do we go forward? And I think the first thing we do is that administrators, leadership, school boards, government agents need to shut up and listen to the teachers. The next time we're at a big staff meeting and the administrators talk for an hour and a half about whatever crap they're talking about, let the teachers talk. All right, principal, I know you have a lot to say, but shut up. Let's listen to the teachers. And you sit down and take notes. Do it for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Take notes. Start listening to what the teachers are saying because they're the ones that are in the classroom dealing with the kids and trying to do their best with the limited resources they have every day. Listen to the teachers. Number two, listen to and support the students. How many times in education do we make decisions and never ask a kid? Just think about that for a second. How many times do we make these arbitrary decisions that impact thousands of our students and never in any of those decisions were the students brought in to ask them what they thought? I have had some of the best conversations about the world of education with students who had like 0 point something grade point averages, who were the bad kids, who were expelled, who were suspended multiple times. Instead of saying that those bad kids don't have something to say, they do have something to say. Listen to those kids. Listen to the kids in the middle. Listen to the kids at the top. Think about them first when you're making decisions that are going to impact their experience sitting in those seats and walking in the hallways of your school. Have you truly thought about the students and what they need right now in 2022 and 2023 and 2024? Let's not do what we've always done. Let's not do what we did 10 years ago or 20 or 30 years ago. That's so much of education is based off of. Let's listen to the kids and let's listen to the teachers and let's move forward because those are the people that matter most in the entire educational system. If we follow the research, if we listen to the research and we listen to the students and the teachers, I think that is a start. It is a path forward. So if more administrators and more principals would just close their mouths and listen and take notes, I think that's at least a step in the right direction. I think that's a little bit of a path forward. This profession and this mission, this idea of public education is worth saving. It's worth fighting for. I believe in it. So even though I've just rallied on about how negative some of it is, and a lot of that's true, I want the best out of the future. I want future teachers to come into the classroom and make an impact. I want them to come into the classroom and love teaching. I want my son, who's in the public school system right now, I want him to continue on his path, and I want him to love learning and going to school and being invigorated by the system. I want a school that listens to teachers and kids and does what's right for them every day and thinks about their ultimate needs in the future instead of just feeding the system, instead of just keeping the status quo going. I wish that I was stronger. I wish I would have rattled more cages. I feel a little bit of guilt about leaving the profession and being so happy. Like I am. I'm so incredibly happy that I left. I was dealing with a difficult situation, and at the time I was so angry at the situation, but now I feel like I was lucky because it kind of gave me that path out of the career that was bringing so much stress and pain to my life. But the guilt is still there. I still feel guilty. Like I said, my son's in there. I know other teachers that are teaching right now. I know some people that are getting into teaching, and I have nothing but the best hope for them. And my wish is that this video is a little bit of a part of a conversation that we need to have as a society going forward in order to make things better.